Hey, 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 and welcome back to Boundaries Unleashed. I'm Vicky. Today we are going to be talking all about self-care, and it's it's not about the kind that you see like all over your Instagram feed where it's all glam and like perfect candles and bubble baths. No, what we're talking about, and don't get me wrong, like those are wonderful. Those are amazing self-care. But I want to go and take us a little deeper because self care isn't always obvious, it isn't always pretty, and it's not always comfortable. So sometimes it looks like asking for help, sometimes it means doing less, sometimes it looks like saying no when it feels easier to say yes. So in this episode, we're going to explore what it means to be integrity with our self care versus when it's performative or conditional based on our own conditioning. All right, so we're going to be talking about how this affects our energy, our time, and our relationships. And I'll explore some tricky but powerful forms of self care that you may not have thought of before. You may not have thought of them as self care, and maybe that's the exact type of self care you need. So I'll share those with you today. And of course, I'm going to give you 3 ways, my affliction for three. I'm going to give you 3 ways to make sure your self care is actually restorative and intentional. So you're actually building a stronger relationship with yourself, right? Because that's what this is all about. All right. So I want to first start with just kind of defining the differences between integrity versus performative self care. Now, when I talk about this, when our self care is in integrity, it's aligned with our actual needs and desires. So it will match your energy, it will match your values, it will match what your body and your spirit is actually asking for in the moment. Okay? Because as we go through life, our needs change, our desires change. It can be a minute to minute thing, it can be experiential, it can be a lifetime thing, but it needs to be integrity and an alignment. So it needs to match those things, your energy, your values, and what you actually need. Okay, so that's more when our self care is in integrity. When it's performative or conditional self care, if you will, it's going to feel different. It's really going to come from outside of us. So it's going to be less intrinsic and more extrinsic. Hope I'm saying that right. And so it's I should be doing this. My Instagram feed says this is the next best thing, that if I want X, Y, and Z result, I need these things. It's everyone else around me is doing it, so they must know something I don't know. It feels more like a checklist. It feels more like a little nudging kind of peer pressure kind of deal. And we tend to look at these things like, wow, if it feels good for them, of course it'll feel good for me too. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it feels good in the moment, but it's not actually what we need. It's not actually what our body and our soul is actually craving. And so, if it's something that feels trendy and it feels like, oh, we're all doing cold plunges, cool, I'm going to get a cold plunge. Sometimes trendy things can work for us, but most of the time they don't. And it's when we let go of our internal voice and rely on external voices to decide for us what self-care looks like, that's when things can be more performative. That's when things can be more conditional as opposed to being in integrity with our self-care. So the difference is subtle, but it is an important one. And because when we're intentional about it, when it's in integrity with our values and our energy and our needs and our desires, it will give back to you. It will feel good, not only in the moment, but in the long term. And the other versions tend to drain us, and they tend to use our time, right? We spend time doing it thinking it's going to help, and really we lost that time, and we never got our needs actually fulfilled. We never got the restorative of self-care that we were actually craving. And so what this could look like, I see this a lot, especially with my journal people. I go in seasons of journaling, but most of the time I don't. I only do tarot journaling when I do my tarot spreads. But this could look like engaging in journaling practices because it actually clears your head versus feeling guilt. You're guilting yourself into doing a journal practice because you don't want to miss it and you don't want to feel guilty if you actually skip it. And one is restorative and nurturing and life-giving, and the other one just has a different energy and tone to it. So it's not actually helping you. It's not actual self-care. If you're just doing it as a checklist and, oh, I should be doing this, or everyone's doing this, or someone asked me to do this, or whatever the story you're telling yourself is, that's conditioning, and it's a total different energy. Now, there are some forms of self-care that are a little less obvious. So I wanted to share these with everyone today because I feel it's important to know that self-care looks different for everybody. It also looks different in different seasons we're in, but it can also be a little bit more subtle and not as obvious as, say, the bubble baths and the candles and all the things, okay? And the first one's actually a big one, which may resonate for most of you, I think. And that's for allowing people to help you. Now, this form of self-care was one that my soul had been begging my whole life for, but I constantly resisted it because of I need to figure it out myself. I have no safety net. I have to do it. Like, I'm only responsible for me. I can't expect anyone to help me. And so I just got really good at doing everything. And so, like, I would never dare someone to help me because it meant that I was a failure, meant that I couldn't help myself, or, whatever the story I was telling myself. But when I actually started allowing people to help, like, that unlocked a part of me that I didn't know I was craving for so deeply. And, this happened when I had shoulder surgery a few years ago. I mean, I was in a sling for months, for weeks. I was in physical therapy. I physically could not do things and everything that I would normally do, right? And I was a primary caretaker for my daughter. And she was young and she wanted to be held, and getting her in the car seat and buckled up, like all these things I literally could not do because I only had one arm and I was in a lot of pain and everything. And so just even the day-to-day things around the house, my default mode prior to surgery and even at the beginning of my recovery was, I have to figure it out. Like, I can do it all, so let me do it. And so that was my default, was to kind of power through and push through things and prove that I could do it all. But it wasn't serving me. And truth be told, I couldn't. Quite literally, I couldn't. And so I had to let others step in. I had to receive meals. I had to let, my husband do a lot of the things around the house that I normally did. I had to ask people to meet me in parking lots to buckle my daughter in and help me take her out of the car and all these things. And so normally I would have control on all of these things, but I had to receive help. And that was a form of self-care that was missing. And once it was introduced, it felt so uncomfortable at first. But again, it felt immediately restorative and long-term restorative. So that's how I knew it was in integrity with what I actually needed. And so it felt like radical self-care, but it really opened up a part of me that I was like, wow, I am deserving of receiving help. And I'm actually gifting someone the opportunity to help me, for them to show their love. And what a gift to be able to allow people to feel useful and allow people to help the people that they care about. So it helped me rewrite the story that I don't have to do it all in order to be loved or to be worthy. So that's a big one, allowing help. So if you resonate with that, let me know, leave a comment, give me a shout out on Instagram. Let me know, because I know that one could be a big one. So a little less obvious is asking for help. The second one, which if you've listened to me for any length of time, it's all about saying no, and specifically saying no without over-explaining. And I feel like this one doesn't get enough credit because, especially as recovering people pleasers, we often feel like we have to justify us saying no, right? Like, for one, it's not normal for us to say no. And two, it's like if we do say it, we feel like we owe someone an explanation, like, it's not you, it's me. Where yes, like, it is us, not them. However, they don't need to know, right? They don't need the 5-paragraph essay on why you're doing what you need to do. And so it's really it relieves us of the guilt, right? It doesn't have that, we don't have to say, I'll make it up to you. It's just a clear, compassionate boundary. And I've seen this in my clients too. I remember I had a client who was invited to a last minute get together, and she had a long week. And I remember on the coaching call, like, she was even tired. Like, I was really impressed that she actually showed up to the coaching call, but she had a really long week, and a client invited her out. So she felt compelled because it was a work relationship kind of deal. But she was exhausted. She had a long week. And the old version of her would have gone out of fear of making a client mad of her, out of fear of missing out, but she would have been exhausted and she would have resented it the entire time, and it could have compromised that client relationship as well. But instead she said, thanks so much for the invite, but I'm going to rest tonight. And what a powerful way to just demonstrate, like, not only is she know what she needs, but she's able to communicate that as well. And she left it at that. She didn't over explain herself. She didn't have to tell her client why. Even though she said, I'm just going to rest, she didn't say why she needed to rest. She didn't say how she was going to rest. She didn't say, I'll make it up to you. It was just a beautiful, simple no without any explanation. And that, my friends, is beautiful and oftentimes overlooked. It protected her energy. It made her more present. And so the next time that she was with that client, she was at full throttle and able to go, not only with that client, but also just with other people. So the next invite or the next outing, she was able to bring her whole self to that event. So that's an example of a little lesser valued, I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but a little lesser way of expressing self-care is saying no without over-explaining. Now, another one is silence and space. So sometimes the best self-care is nothing at all, like literally nothing, not doing anything, no checklist, literal silence. And if you have a little bit of anxiety, if you have a perfectionist tendencies, it's really hard to just sit and do nothing, right? Because you just want to be productive. You're like, what kind of task list can I get on? How can I hit that dopamine, get it done? I'm busy, I need to get it done. And it's really hard to just give ourselves space to actually rest. And, I used to feel guilty of this. I remember when I would have coffee on the porch and I'm just literally sitting, me and my coffee on my back porch or even in my sunroom. And I was like, there's so many things I could be doing. I could be checking client emails while I'm sipping this coffee. I could be walking my dog while I'm sipping. I used to guilt myself into thinking I had to be doing more than one thing at a time. But when I actually just sat in silence, no headphones, no phone, no multitasking stuff going on, it felt so restorative for me. And then I actually started scheduling it. I started actually scheduling rest within my calendar. So when that time actually came, I didn't feel guilty about it because it was on my checklist. Sit and do nothing. And it was great. It was everything I thought it could be. Great movie reference if you get that one. And so when we can really reframe that rest and doing nothing is actually being productive, I think it's super helpful in an underrated self-care activity. And so it can be very powerful and can be very restorative if you allow yourself to actually relax and just be instead of doing some output or feeling like you need to be in action. So silence and in space. All right. Now, the last kind of tricky or lesser known self-care act is also a big one too that I feel like doesn't get enough attention, and that is financial boundaries. Especially when, the economy, we can always talk about the economy, right, is in flux. There's a lot of turbulence in markets and, we're in this position where it's like, ooh, can I invest? Can I not invest? So money is tight for a lot of people and things are expensive. And when we can realize that not spending money is a form of self-care, we really can support our future selves, right? Because we're sold the idea that self-care means buying something, right? Buying the face mask, buying the massage, booking the girls' trip, the retreat, buying supplements, right? We often associate self-care with purchasing or investing heavily in to get restorative rest. But oftentimes what you can actually get that restorative feeling is not spending money. And all those other things are wonderful, right? I love me a good trip. I love me a good face mask. I love a good spa day. But if it's not nourishing, if it makes you feel more guilty because now your bank account is lower and now you're like, how am I going to save up the money to do this future thing that I'm trying to do? It can create more stress than rest. Sometimes, the most honest self-care is saying no, I don't need that right now. What I need to do is honor my budget and give my future self the stability and nerve relaxing environment of knowing that my bank account is cushioned and it's set for the goals and the bigger goals that I have in mind for my future self. And that caring and that peace of mind that stability you're creating for yourself, that can mean so much more than any product you could ever buy. So financial boundaries, huge, huge, huge for self-care. So those are the 4 that I think are a little less obvious: the allowing people to help, receiving help, saying no without over-explaining, silence and giving yourself space, and financial boundaries. Now, how does either those types of self-care or just self-care in general, how does it shape our energy? How does it shape our time? And how does it shape our relationships? When we practice self-care in integrity with ourselves, it changes the way we show up for everything in our energy, we are more fueled, we are more empowered and less burnout, less running on empty, right? We show up to things with much more pizzazz and much more energy and motivation because we truly do feel rested. It affects our time, it shapes our time. We're much more intentional about where we spend our time, where we spend our energy, who we're around, right? It's not just filling hours with like, got to get my journaling in. Oh, I got to get this walk in. Oh, I got to do this, right? We're not just checking off a list, but we're being very intentional about how we're spending our space. And self-care can really shape our relationships because when we take care of ourselves, you know, the old adage, we stop pouring from an empty cup. You're less resentful, you're less overextended, and you're just a pleasure to be around. You don't want to be depleted and cranky and nagging or whatever because you just, you're overstimulated or whatever. You're actually restored. And so when you can be more present, I mean, that's a form of care and love toward the people you care about, right? And so it's almost giving back to them as well. It's a present to them to show up in your highest light for them and the highest light for yourself. But self-care really shapes most things, right? It shapes your energy, your time, and your relationships. Performative self-care, though it can actually feel good in the moment, it can actually backfire. And I talked about this a little bit a minute ago, is that, when we're doing it more performatively, when we're doing it from conditioning and what we should be doing, right? All the shoulds, it can actually take your time. So you can lose time that you can't get back. You can lose resources, money that, you could have been used for other things that are actually more useful for you. It can take you away from spending time with the people you care about when it's like, you're doing these things, but you're just, going through the motions. It's not actually restoring you and letting you show up in your like highest energy and in highest self. So it can actually, this performative self-care can actually leave you more tired than when you originally started. And that defeats the whole point, right? So why do it if it's not even going to help? So what are 3 ways that we can ensure that our self-care is actually useful and intentional? So the first one is to check the source. So before you do the thing, before you buy the thing, before you decide on the thing, pause and ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want it or need it, or because I think I should? And when we pause and ask ourselves that question, it really allows ourselves to bring us back to our values, bring us back in integrity. And so that way we can make sure that when we do make those decisions, we know it's it's for our highest good, okay? And not just fulfilling a superficial need in the moment. So check the source. Is it because you want and need it, or is it because you think you should be doing it? So just taking that pause and asking yourself. Secondly, track the aftermath. What happened? Notice how you feel afterwards. If you do a self-care, does it feel good? Does it feel good for a long time? Does it feel good for a second and feel fleeting? Do you feel clearer? Do you feel restored? How do you feel? Do you feel heavier, resentful? Is there like no difference one way or the other? The aftermath will give you signals and signs to actually help you understand if this self-care is actually self-care or just another task that you're masking as self-care, right? So it's not actually serving you if it doesn't really restore and rest you, right? We want it to affect you in a positive way. So just kind of making note about how you feel, what kind of thoughts you're having, your sleep, your energy. Think about your time, your energy, and your relationships. Are any of those 3 better? Then that self-care is probably good for you. So tracking how you feel afterwards, tracking the aftermath. And lastly, expand your definition of self-care, right? Because I talked about 4 different ways that may not feel like self-care, but actually is. So sometimes when we can expand the definition of what self-care is, we actually can open ourselves up to the restoration that we actually need when we can think outside of candles and bubble baths. Right? It doesn't have to be glamorous. I think a lot of times we kind of, overinflate and make it super glamorous that self-care has to be luxurious spa-like, but oftentimes it can be saving money, doing your bills, getting your taxes ready. It's not glamorous, but it is restorative to you. And sometimes it's leaving the dishes in the sink. And I know for some of you are screaming like, no, we never do that. But that could be the self-care you need in the moment, right? Taking a nap, asking for help, saying no. when we can broaden our definition, we can really free ourselves from the shoulds and really open the door to what we really need that's actually going to nourish us. All right, so those are 3 ways that we can ensure our self-care is useful and intentional. Check the source, track the aftermath, and expand the definition. So let's bring this all together. Self-care in integrity isn't about aesthetics or trends. It's about meeting yourself where you are. It's about giving yourself what you actually need. And it's about building something stronger and more trusting relationship with yourself. And it's not always obvious and it's not always easy, but it's always worth it. All right. Now, this week, I want to leave you with 2 reflection questions so you can kind of assess for yourself, is my self-care in integrity, or is it more performative and conditional? So your first reflection question is, where in your life are you practicing self-care from a place of should instead of true need? So where in your life are you practicing self-care from a place of should instead of true need? And the second reflection question I want to offer you is, what's one small way, or could you shift that into integrity this week? So what is one small way you could shift that into integrity this week? All right, so if there's something you feel like you're doing out of habit or doing because you've always done it and you think you should be doing it, how can you turn that so it actually is in integrity with what you actually need? Let those questions sit with you. Let them guide your choices, because the most powerful self-care isn't what looks good on the outside. It's actually what restores your soul and feels good on the inside. So thanks for being here with me today. I always appreciate it. And I just wanted to give a shout out. This is my 50th episode. Didn't think I'd get to 50 when I first started this podcast. I think maybe I did, but it still feels good nonetheless. So thanks for sticking with me for 50 episodes and many, many, many more to come. So thank you for hanging with me today, thinking about your own self-care. If this episode really resonated with you, please share it with a friend who might need that reminder that self-care isn't messy. It can be really beautiful. It can be really restorative and super powerful all at once. So I'll see you next time on Boundaries Unleashed. And as always, remember, love yourself like you mean it. Bye for now.